Thank you, Jamyang, and thank you, Julia. Welcome, everybody. My thanks to Shangsheng Institute UK for inviting me back yet again. The talk tonight, or the theme of the talk, came from Julia, who was keen on knowing more about what Ayurveda has to say about combining foods. So this is to meet her request, and then also it's a topic that I enjoy as well. Anything about holistic healing with an Ayurvedic approach speaks to me. So I hope to share tonight this effervescence with you. And let me tell you, first of all, a little bit about my background. I'll make it quite short. I first came to Ayurveda through my mom, who's here tonight too, from South Dakota, where I'm originally from. And when I was living in France for the first time, not for the first time, but many years ago, she sent me a book called Perfect Health by Deepak Chopra. And it was my first insight into Ayurvedic science. The Ayurvedic science is traditional medicine that comes from India. And I ate up the book and had to know more. And to make it all short, it led me to yoga studies, first of all, and then to studying Ayurveda formally at the Ayurvedic Institute in New Mexico, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, with the world-known Dr. Vasant Lad. And I did a 2-year program there, which allowed me to become an Ayurvedic consultant. We don't really say practitioner or doctor because that requires a lot of studies. And then I went on to specialize in yoga from an Ayurvedic perspective, as well as Ayurvedic nutrition, and then ended up working at the Ayurvedic Institute, teaching and working in the publishing department, and continuing my studies for 5 more years, and then developed my own practice. And here I am now today in France, and doing more of the same, just in a different context. Mainly these days, I'm offering Ayurvedic nutritional consultations online. And then also once a month, I give a cooking class, an Ayurvedic cooking class, combined with some yoga. And it's in French, so people who are French speakers and interested in joining, I can give you the information, but maybe that'll expand to across the borders, and maybe in time, I'll do some of that in English as well. So let's talk about food combining. That's the reason why you're all here. And thank you for coming to listen to this juicy topic. I'm saying juicy because it can maybe be a little heavy or challenging to understand, but I'd like to make it light and digestible for you. So I'm going to show some slides. Let me do a screen share here. And if you want to take notes, please do. But just know that the slides that I'm showing will be available to you. If you're interested, I can have them sent to you. That way you can, if you just want to sit back with a good cup of tea and listen and take it all in and absorb it, feel free to do so. So here's the kind of the plan that I have for the talk tonight. So talking about this Ayurvedic art of combining food. This is kind of unique to Ayurveda. In fact, some other systems have it, but it's truly, for me, something that I first learned through Ayurveda. And I'd like to begin by talking about why it matters. Why do we need to pay attention to the foods that we combine together? I'd like to tell you a little bit also about the science behind it, which I'll call Ayurvedic food energetics. So this will help us understand the food rules. And I'd like to say that actually these aren't rules. Think of them more as guidelines. Because if we start thinking about them as rules, then it gets a little strict and a little dogmatic. And Ayurveda is not really a science of dogmas, or you have to, or it needs to be like this. They're really just suggestions that help us get to know ourselves better. And when we know ourselves better, when we're more aware of what works and what doesn't work, then we can eliminate the things that don't work in favor of the things that do. The third thing, I'll show you some of the major food groups, and within those, some of the combinations that are difficult, as well as healthy ones, I'll give some examples, and also for the difficult combinations, I'll make some suggestions on how you can make better combinations, so swapping out different foods. And then I'll end with giving you some antidotes, some different hacks or tips, and some digestive aids to help make the difficult combinations more digestible, and also give you some ideas on how you can actually improve your digestive strength. So here we go. Careful food combining. Why does it matter? Well, the first thing is that if you have healthy digestion, good food combining will help you to maintain that digestion. And for those who have weak digestion, it'll help to improve it. Good food combining gives the body deep nourishment. So when we take in food and we digest it, it helps us on many levels. But what we're really looking for in the food that we eat, or the herbs that we take, or anything that goes inside of us, we want it to nourish our deep tissues. And this is possible with optimal digestion. And when we make poor food combinings, the nutrition doesn't get to the deep levels. So here we're really talking about how can we nourish the body in a deep way, but also in a sustainable way, one that's lasting. And food combining can be really helpful to reverse or to lessen some of the imbalances that come with improperly digested food. So this could be our digestive system that's been weakened over time because we haven't combined foods in a good way. And so by simply making some adjustments to the choices that we make of food combining, we can help reverse these imbalances. And then you can think about food combining as a long-term investment in your health. When we spend less time digesting, our body has energy for other things. We have more vitality. We're not engaging in digestive wars. And when the body isn't having a war on digestion, then it has energy for other things. We can also, I'm going to take to the next slide. We can also have increased vitality and energy, just repeated that, better digestion, absorption, assimilation, and elimination. We can have heightened clarity, lightness of being, and even better sleep. So these, for me, are all motivations to have good food combining, to have optimal digestion so that we can benefit from these things that I think everyone is in search for. Before I go into the details, I want to suggest some mantras. So for those of you who don't know what the word mantra means, mantra is a sacred sound or a sacred word or a chain of secret words or sacred words. And so these are my mantras, things to keep in mind, kind of the key points. And 3 out of these 5 come from a teacher and common amongst all of us, most of us, Chogyal Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche, who used 3 of these in his teachings, in his spiritual teachings. And he also encouraged us all to integrate the teachings into daily life. And so I like to use these teachings in my own life and through the things that I share. And one of the things that he often said was, do your best. And what this means for me in the context of food combining or food choices is to keep in mind that these are guidelines, they're not rules. And we can look at this more or less like a dance. So we do our best when we can. We follow the rules when we can. It's really an idea of being consciously aware and kind of when we know things, if we can do them, if we can't, it doesn't really matter. We just do our best. The second one is work with your circumstances. And what I translate this to be in terms of food combining or food choices is be flexible. Follow the guidelines when you can. When you can't, use antidotes or just simply relax, which is the next one. If we get too tight around what goes on our plate, or if we have too many concepts in our mind or in our body, the body can tend to contract, or we get stressed. Sometimes, and maybe even too much information is coming in. You hear one system says this and another one says this, and then we get confused. And then it creates a lot of mental indigestion. So when we're working with these different concepts, my suggestion is don't stress over the information. Once you have the information, try not to get overzealous with the guidelines. There can seem like there's a lot to be done. So just keep it simple and try to relax rather than contract. It's true that when we contract, our body can't digest, whether it be food, information, emotions, thoughts. Optimal digestion can really only take place in a relaxed atmosphere. So my invitation is to you is to create that relaxed atmosphere for yourselves. The next mantra is keep in mind that it all depends. And what does that mean? Well, Ayurveda is a system that is based in time and space, meaning that things are ever changing. Our individual evolves, we evolve with time, things change in relationship to where we are, the time of day, the time of year, the time of our life. So what works at one point in time may not work at another, or when one thing works in one situation, it may not work in another. So we need, again, to be flexible. Along those lines, some of us are more gifted than others. And the reason I say that is that some people can digest rocks or digest things that are really difficult. And other people, the slightest thing that goes off the charts or off of their what's normal for them, they have a really difficult time. So if you can digest most things, even the most strangest of combinations, consider yourself lucky or gifted. If you don't have digestive issues, then don't worry. However, if certain combinations make you feel bad, or if you have chronic digestive disorders, following these food combining guidelines can be really important for you. So some of the determining factors of this, it all depends, or whether we can digest something or not, is really the strength of our digestive fire, the strength of the individual, which plays a big role in our vitality, I should say, plays a big role. Our culture, our ethnicity, again, the season, the context we're in, the age. Those of you who are over 50, like I am, you notice that the older we get, the more we have to pay attention to our digestion. We don't really digest the same way we did when we were 18 or 25. So all of this falls under the category of it depends. And then the last mantra would be cultivating awareness. And this is really key in terms of combining food. First of all, when you receive the information or whatever you hear tonight about these guidelines, one of the first pieces of information or awareness that you could notice is, am I resistant to this information? So that's already, if you are, that's a bit of awareness. And then once you're actually combining foods and working with these different guidelines, I invite you to pay attention to the result of these food combinations. So observe the changes when you eat. Notice your energy level. For example, are you sleepy after a meal? Or after lunch, maybe do you feel like taking a nap? Or maybe later on in the day, like 4 or 5 p.m., do you feel like a slug, or you have a crash in energy? All of these things can be signs that the foods that you're eating together aren't appropriate. Also, how about your digestion? After eating certain combinations, do you feel gassy? Do you feel bloated? Do you have do you pass gas? Do you feel nauseous? Also, how about your elimination? Elimination is a big key in determining health and also whether we digest or not. Do you eliminate it every day? Are you more tendent towards constipation or diarrhea? Also, how about the coating on your tongue? I don't know how many of you look at your tongue on a daily basis or even scrape your tongue, which is a yogic and Ayurvedic daily practice. But when we have coating on our tongue, that's a sign that we aren't digesting our food properly, or even indentations along the side of the tongue. So these are things to observe to heighten our awareness that maybe something isn't quite right. So spring, here we are in spring, and this is a great time to leap into new supportive combinations. So hopefully the information that I share with you tonight will be motivating for you to try on, maybe one at a time, and see for yourself and see how this works for you. And I say one suggestion at a time because this can seem like a lot for those who aren't used to considering what goes on their plate. And if it's too much, then you might just have a tendency of saying, okay, it was just too much, too complicated, I'm not going to do it. So I suggest maybe a gradual integration, doing one thing at a time, and then when it becomes second nature, then add something else. And over time, you'll be following all the guidelines. Okay, onwards. Excuse me. Okay, so our goal is in this food combining is really to work for your body and not against it. So what Ayurveda is suggesting, or what I'm going to share with you tonight, is not really to take away your favorite foods or deprive you or take away what you're used to eating, but it's really guidelines that help you eat for your body and not eat foods that go against it or against health. So all this information will be food for thought and really an invitation to explore. So let's talk about the Ayurvedic take on food combining. So this is the part about the science behind it. So two major players come into the game here, and that's our metabolic fire and food energetics. So what is metabolic fire? Ayurveda calls our metabolic fire Agni, and the opposite of Agni is Ama, and I'll talk about Ama in a second. So first of all, Agni. Agni is the Sanskrit word for the digestive function, and this digestive function not only in the stomach or in the digestive tract, the GI tract, but Agni is all over. There are 49 different kinds of Agni or metabolic fires in the body. The one that we're going to talk about tonight is really the fire of digestion. But I just wanted to say in passing that there's fire, or there's metabolic fire all over. And this is important because without this fire, we can't transform anything. We can't transform food. We can't transform our thoughts. We can't transform our emotions. So it's really important that we cultivate a good fire. And once it's cultivated, that we keep it going strong. Because robust digestive strength is the key to working with challenging food combinations. Like I was saying earlier, if you have really strong digestive fire, if you're gifted or you're lucky, then you can digest just about anything. If you have weak digestive fire, even the slightest combination that's off will give you problems. So we really want to work on strengthening this Agni or metabolic fire. The opposite of Agni is Ama. Ama is defined according to Ayurveda as this thick, sticky residue of incomplete digestion, which means that any food, any thought, any emotion, but here we're talking about food, that goes undigested because of weak digestive fire, poor Agni, that food lingers on and it gets transformed into this thick, sticky residue that the body can't release. And this is what Ayurveda considers to be the cause of disease. And Ayurveda considers that 80% of diseases have their origin in digestion or in the digestive strength in Agni. So another motivation to keep our Agni going strong, because Agni has the possibility of burning Ama. Now, don't get too I don't know, I'm stressed about this word Ama. Actually can also translate into toxins, because when we hear toxins, we think, oh, something's wrong. But just know that there are varying degrees of Ama in the body, and some are easier to take care of and other situations are not. But again, if we really tend to Agni, it'll be a good way of reducing Ama. So what I'd like to suggest is that we together set an intention or ask our inner flame, which is actually a divine flame, to set the stage for our understanding tonight. So it's going to work on our mental fire as well, and as well our digestion. So this invocation comes from the Vedic tradition, and on the left you have the invocation in Sanskrit and on the right in English. So if you'd like, we can say this together. Let's say it first in English, and then I'll chant it in Sanskrit, and feel free to join me if you'd like. Salutations and salutations to the divine flame of the lamp, which bestows on me all that is good, health as well as wealth, and destroys all my obstacles. And now in Sanskrit, Shubham karoti kalyanam arogyam dana sampadam shatru buddhi vinayasa dipa jyoti namo namah. This is a prayer or an invocation you can make before eating or any time that you need help from that inner fire. You can also chant one syllable, a single syllable, Ram, R-A-M, Ram. And this Ram is the seed syllable for the fire element. And you can simply chant Ram, 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 Ram. Join me if you'd like. Ram, 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 Ram. In any way that you would like. Just know that this is a way of also increasing fire or Agni in the body. And maybe you notice a little bit of heat if you did chant along. So now that was the first part. Let's talk about the principles, the other principles of Ayurvedic food energetics. So there are 4 principles. They are rasa, virya, and vipaka. Those are the 3, I should say 3 plus 1. So rasa, virya, vipaka. And the 4th one is prabhava or prabhav. So for the first 3, rasa, virya, and vipaka, all foods have all of these 3. And I'll go into in a minute what each of them is. So every food has these 3 principles, these 3 energetics. Now, some foods, when they're eaten alone, may be very beneficial for the body, stimulating Agni, our metabolism. They're foods that can be very easily digested when eaten on their own. And they could even be foods that help burn ama or toxins. However, when these foods are eaten in combination with other foods, they can be considered to be incompatible. And when foods are incompatible, even though alone they might be beneficial, when these improper combinations or unhealthy combinations come together. They can tax our metabolism, tax our Agni. They can also shut down our enzyme production, mainly in the stomach and in the pancreas, as well as the liver. These improper combinations can create indigestion or incomplete digestion because food doesn't get broken down as it should. And then these foods are likely to ferment in the digestive tract. Fermentation, like creating your own wine in the stomach. And when that happens, that can create a sour stomach, acid indigestion, gas, bloating, flatulence. It can also create heaviness and slow down our digestion. And on a subtle level, it can lead to obstructing our subtle channels. And of course, create ama, this toxic situation. So the explanation behind this is that radically different energetics that come together in combinations of a different rasa, a different virya, and a different vipaka are eaten together at the same meal or at the same time, create havoc or create very difficult time for digestion. Otherwise said, these foods that are combined, they give mixed messages to the body. With individual foods needs a certain digestive environment, and another food needs a different kind of digestive environment. And when the two come together, then it creates confusion for our system. I'll give you some more details to make it better understood. So here are those three energetics, or the three principles: rasa, which means taste; virya, which means potent energy. This is also can be considered to be thermal energy; and vipaka, which is the effect that the food has on our body after it gets digested. I'll talk more about those. Let's talk first of all about sat rasa. Sat means six, and rasa means taste. So every food has one or more of these six tastes. And they're in a certain order, and I'll tell you why in a minute. So the tastes are sweet, sour, and salty, pungent, bitter, and astringent. I think everybody is familiar with the sweet taste. Sour comes from citrus fruits, vinegar, different things like that. Salty, I think that one's understood as well. Pungent, I think everyone's familiar with that. Bitter, think about coffee that has no sugar in it. Bitter greens, leafy greens. And astringent, those are foods that make your mouth pucker. Think about an unripe banana, or beans are astringent. Quinoa is astringent. So these foods that kind of make your mouth pucker, even though, or make your mouth dry or secrete fluids, that's astringent. I won't go into many food details. I want to really talk about the energetics. So just keep these six tastes in mind, that all foods have either one or more of these six tastes. And I was saying that the order is important because each of the tastes corresponds to one phase or one stage of digestion. This graphic comes from one of my teacher, Dr. Vasant Lad, one of his books, his textbook of Ayurveda. And he shows here in the drawing that he did himself that each part of digestion has a taste associated. And this will be important as we go along the explanation of the food energetics. So the first taste, sweet, is digested in the stomach. In the bottom of the stomach is the sour taste. In the duodenum, which is the part that goes between the stomach and the small intestine, salty. In the small intestine, pungent. And then when we get down to the large intestine, it's the bitter taste that's digested, and astringent is digested finally in the very end of the colon and the colon. So this gives you kind of an overlook of the six tastes in terms of where they are digested along the digestive tract. The one that we're really going to focus on today is what happens in the stomach. The rest is for further studies or another talk. So the next concept is virya. So we have rasa and now virya. Virya means potent energy. And this is a food's direct effect on metabolism or the metabolic fire. So every food has either a heating or a cooling nature to it. Think of this as the thermal nature, the thermal quality of a food. An example of a heating food, I think you all agree, is a chili pepper. Out of the meats, of like all meats, lamb and mutton are the most heating of meats, whereas maybe a cooler meat would be chicken. Other heating foods are a lot of the spices. Think about pepper, ginger, and things like that. And know too that when I say heating or cooling, these are spectrums. It's not hot, hot, hot all the time. Think of it as very hot to warming. And that cooling isn't only a cold, 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 but it can be cooling or very cold. Examples, like very cold, I think you'll all agree, ice cream or anything that comes out of freezer. Then things that come out of refrigerator that haven't been heated up, those are all cold in nature. Excuse me. Other foods that are cooling are a lot of the foods we find in the summer, because nature in her intelligence gives us foods that are antidotes to the season, in the season, like watermelon, melon, berries, cherries, grapes, things like that, cucumber. Cilantro is one of the most cooling foods that exists. So when we talk about virya here, this is the intrinsic nature of a food. Even though you may cook a cooling food, it's always going to have within it a cooling nature. It's going to give warmth to the food and warmth to the body if you eat that cooling food in a warm state. But just know that ice cream is always going to be cold, even if you put black pepper on it, or a chili pepper is always going to be heating, even if you eat it with cilantro, which is very cooling. The cilantro will be an antidote, but the chili will always be heating. Going on, our third concept, or our third principle of this food energetic, according to Ayurveda, is what we call vipaka. This is the effect after food gets digested. And this vipaka, which again you can think of as the long-term effect, this depends on two things. It depends on the taste. So one of those 6 tastes that I mentioned earlier, sweet, sour, salty, bitter, pungent, or astringent, as well as agni, your metabolic strength. So these two play a role in determining the effect of a food after it's been digested. And another way to think of vipaka is an extension of each taste action. And why I say this is that vipaka there are 3 vipakas that exist. There's sweet, sour, and pungent. So we're no longer, when we get past the digestive phase, we're no longer working with the 6 tastes, we're only working with 3. And to explain the why behind it goes beyond the scope of our time tonight, but what I'm going to share with you is what Ayurveda has created so that it's understandable for you by food group, rather than needing to go and understand why every single food, what the rasa is, what the virya is, or what the vipaka is. So here we go to look at that. Let's take an example of a difficult food combination. So now we're getting into the examples, and so can really make it tangible for you. So this food combination may, for certain cultures, I know there are people from all over the world here tonight, but this one, this example comes from the American culture. I grew up in America, and this is really prevalent, or used to be in the past. Milk and bananas eaten together, like in a smoothie or a banana milkshake or a pudding with bananas or some kind of dessert that has the two. So here we get to see the intelligence behind the food energetics, the rasa, the taste, the virya, the potential, and the post-digestive effect. So why do milk and bananas do not combine? Well, they have the same taste. They're both sweet. However, their energy or their potent energy, their thermal nature is radically different. Milk is cooling, and a banana is considered to be heating. Now, when we eat a banana, it's not like eating a chili pepper, but it has a nature to it that's warming. And then we get to the post-digestive effect. Milk has a sweet post-digestive effect, and a banana has a sour post-digestive effect, which creates confusion for our system. So that's why it's difficult to digest milk and banana together. These foods are also foods that create mucus. And when you take them in combination with each other, they can create colds, congestion, allergies. People with asthma, when you get them off or you ask them to stop milk and bananas, often their symptoms go away, and especially the two combined together, or for that matter, milk with any other food. These two foods, in fact, are foods that should ideally be eaten alone. Otherwise, you leave them alone. Let's look at another example of a difficult food combination, milk and lemon. Now, you might intuitively or just feeling wise, you might not be drawn to milk and lemon when you think about it. Oh, that doesn't sound very good. Well, already that's an indication, that's awareness that naturally these two things aren't meant to be eaten together. But we find the two of them together. Let's say you have some tea. You have some tea that you add milk to. And here I'm talking about animal milk, like cow's milk or goat's milk or something like that. And then you put some lemon in it. Well, what happens? The tea or the milk will curdle. Now, this is exactly what happens in the stomach. When you have some food that contains milk and you have lemon or even another citrus food at the same time, it's going to curdle in the stomach. So you're going to create your own cottage cheese or your own cheese or some kind of digestive mess in the stomach. And why? Because the taste of milk is sweet. And the taste, and here when I'm talking about taste, I'm not saying, oh, this tastes good or it tastes like this, but these are the tastes that are inherent within the food itself. And a lemon or other citrus foods come under the category of sour. Milk is cooling and a lemon is heating. And the post-digestive effect of milk is sweet and that of lemon is sour. So all of this creates, again, confusion. Milk requires a certain digestive environment or atmosphere to be properly digested, and a lemon, the opposite. So when you put them together, confusion, indigestion, and problems down the line. Another thing that I like to point out or bring to your mind is that certain foods require different digestive times, meaning the time it takes to move through our system. Milk is longer to digest than, say, a fruit. And that also creates confusion for our digestion when you have something to eat that's quick to digest and then something that's longer to digest. Those different times of digestion will slow down your digestion, create confusion, send out the wrong enzymes, because certain foods require certain enzymes and other foods require other enzymes. Some require alkaline, some require acidic. And when those mixed messages are sent, then the body doesn't know what to do and ends up canceling everything out, creating difficult digestive conditions. Oof. Luckily, there are alternatives. If you were wanting to make a recipe or have a drink with lemon in it that you wanted to have some kind of milky substance, the good news is that there are nut-based milks, and nuts and seeds are a good combination with sour fruits. Hooray, we have a solution or an antidote. So the first major suggestion for difficult food combinations is fruit with anything else, because Sweet, now here we're going back to the order of which tastes are digested. Sweet is the first of the 6 tastes to be digested. What does that mean? That means when you take in something that's sweet, the stomach is going to digest it first of all, and usually with ease. Now, if you eat a meal that has no sweet and you have a dessert at the end, what happens? Well, the stomach is going to say, whoa, I was doing all this work and now something sweet comes along. What's going to happen is everything that was being digested is going to be put on hold, and the stomach is going to go and digest the sweet. So it could be sweet as in sugar or a fruit. And everything that was digesting is going to be sitting there and is going to ferment, or has the potential of fermenting, creating digestive uprest and also, or unrest, and also indigestion. So that's why I mentioned the order of which we eat foods in terms of their taste, and why when you're eating something that has the sweet taste, like I'm not talking about like rice, which is considered to be sweet, or other foods that have a sweet nature, but here I'm talking more about like sweet in its pure form, like a fruit or a dessert. And that's why Ayurveda would say, eat dessert first, because that's the taste that the sweet taste is what the stomach digests first, or your digestive system. So the idea would be to eat your fruit either half an hour to an hour before any other foods or before a meal, or 3 hours afterwards, once everything in your meal has gone through or been properly digested. And in that way, you won't create digestive wars. And again, the reason behind this is that sweet and the other foods, they require a different digestive environment. So the first guideline is keep your fruits separate. And here I've written 30 minutes before anything else. It can be even up to an hour for people who have delicate digestion, or 3 hours after. Now, there are some exceptions to this guideline, and I'll talk about those in a minute, but just know that there are exceptions to the rule. But if you're only going to do one thing in terms of changing the way that you combine your food, this is the place to start. And this, if you were only to follow one suggestion, this is the most important one. The fourth principle of food energetics, according to Ayurveda, is what we call prabhava. It's the unexplained. These are the combinations or the situation that go beyond the rules. And this is due to a specific action of a food. Dr. Ladd, my first Ayurvedic teacher, used to say with Prabhav, when we asked him, well, why is it like that? Or why is this food like that? Or why do these foods combine and the other ones don't? He would say, it is so. It is so. That's how it is. It's unexplainable. It's just, that's how it is. So there are certain foods, and I'll give some examples of this Prabhava. So those are the four, now you have the four principles of Ayurvedic food energetics. So here's one of the exceptions to the rule. So I was saying that fruits should be eaten alone. And when I say fruits here, I'm talking about fresh fruits, but I'm also talking about dried fruits. One of the exceptions to the rule is dates and milk. Ayurveda considered this to be an exception to the rule that these two things should be eaten separately. And Ayurveda even has this lovely recipe for a date and milk shake called an ojas milk, or revitalizing milk. It's kind of a healthy smoothie, if you will, that combines milk and dates and saffron, cardamom, cinnamon, maybe even some ghee, clarified butter, if you know that, some Ayurvedic herbs, if you know of Ayurvedic herbs like ashwagandha or shatavari. These can all go into this nice Ayurvedic smoothie that's really good for boosting immunity, giving strength, good for longevity, and plenty of other things. And so this would be one recipe and an exception to the food rules. You can believe it or not, up to you, but you can give it a try and also see if it works for you. Now, the milk here, I'm talking about animal's milk, because in Ayurveda, there's a high esteem for using cow's milk, or goat's milk or sheep's milk. We in our modern age, there are a lot of difficulties with digesting dairy. I should call it dairy. And so luckily there are all kinds of alternatives. So don't feel like you have to make this recipe or combine these two together. It also works with vegetable-based or nut-based milks. Another consideration, another one of these prabhava, or the unexplained, is lemon and lime. I'm not talking about combining them, but I'm talking about their energetic. Ayurveda considers lemon to be heating in nature. So the vipaka, the virya, the thermal nature, is heating, whereas lime is considered to be cooling. Lemon is heating, lime is cooling. So for an individual, let's say, who has too much heat in the body, it would be beneficial for them to use lime versus lemon. And also lemon is considered to be acidic or acidic forming in the body, whereas lime is alkaline. And that can be interesting as well in terms of combining foods that are acidic in nature or alkaline in nature, which is kind of a different language. We're not going to really talk about that tonight, but just to know that there are different energetics within certain food groups, like within the citrus fruits. Now I'd like to share with you a whole list of different food groups and go through a couple of them to give you some ideas of, well, what are really healthy combinations and what are challenging combinations, a couple examples, and then some antidotes on how to remedy them. So let me make this bigger, so hopefully you can see it. Let's start out with the fruit, just to finish what I started on. So this I'm able to have a copy of. You can also go to the place where I got this, Banyan Botanicals. It's an Ayurvedic food and herbal company that's based in Ashland, Oregon. And a lot of the information here that they got comes from Dr. Vasant Lad and his work. And also you can find a food combining article on Dr. Vasant Lad's website, which is ayurveda.com, the Ayurvedic Institute. And so a lot of this information was pulled from there. So let's look at fruit. So in green, excuse me, in green on this chart are healthy or good or easy to digest food combinations. And in red, these are the challenging food combinations, the ones we want to avoid. And the words that are in capital are the most challenging. So here we're talking about fruit. So good combinations of fruit are fruits with other fruits, and especially those fruits that have similar qualities, like citrus with citrus, which means more than often than not sour with sour, like having lemon and a grapefruit. Or apples and pears, which are considered to be subacid fruits. You can also think about mangoes or berries or grapes or cherries. And then like combining different kinds of berries, that would also be a good combination. What doesn't work is combining fruits of different natures, like bananas. Bananas are a fruit that's super easy to digest if you eat it alone. But when you start putting together with something sour, it's going to be difficult to digest because, again, these are of different nature and they require different kinds of digestive environments to be digested. And where might we find these kind of combinations? Well, a lot of people eat fruit salads where they bring all different kinds of fruits together, which is kind of an Ayurvedic or a challenging digestion. So better to choose fruits with similar qualities if you're going to make a fruit salad. Also, another place where these difficult food combinations come with fruits are in smoothies. Now, smoothies, according to Ayurveda, are really the big bomb in terms of digestion, because often more than one fruit comes together. Often they're very cold. Sometimes the fruits are frozen. So that's already another bomb on our digestion. Oftentimes there are different kinds of things that are mixed. There's protein and fruit and nuts and seeds and all these things that when eaten alone, they can be very beneficial for the body, but when they come together, they can create real wars or real digestive wars. So if you're going to make smoothies, choose one or two fruits of the same category. Choose either fruits or vegetables, or choose vegetables that are in agreement with fruits, things like celery or lettuce. Those two things can combine safely with fruits. Choose a real protein. Not all the powders that are out there. Have something like almonds or flax seeds or chia seeds, and also a good source of fat. And then spices. Now, spices come into play often in Ayurveda, and they're real are, how do you want to say? Those are the antidotes. They're the things, the major players, I should say, that help to lessen the ills of challenging food combinations. So there are specific spices that help with specific foods, but in general, most of the warming spices are going to help with digesting difficult combinations. So like with fruits, the things that I use are cinnamon, cardamom, ginger, either dry or fresh. Just know that of those two, dry and fresh ginger, dry ginger is quite heating, whereas fresh ginger is more on the warming side. Just something to keep in mind. Another place where we find fruits that kind of sneak their way are with yogurts. Fruit and yogurt, according to Ayurveda, is a challenging combination, with the exception of berries. Berries are quite low in their sugar content, so they're acceptable from time to time with yogurt. But fruits and soy, bad combination. Again, bananas with anything else. Let's say you're having coffee with some milk in it, and then you have a fruit along the side. Another challenging combination. Or how about you're having oatmeal and you have some fruit with your oatmeal. If you cook the fruit, it's going to digest better than using or having a raw fruit along with your oatmeal or another kind of cooked cereal. Dried fruits are better cooked in the cereal or even soaked beforehand, which will help to increase digestion. So fruits cooked into oatmeal are okay if they're cooked, if there's some spices there as well to help. So when you are cooking with fruits, including fruit in a meal, let's say you'd like to make like a stew, like a tagine or a couscous, or something that's cooked together in one pot. That's also a way of kind of going around the food rules, such as with fruit, because often it's just in small quantities, like a small quantity of raisins or a small quantity of cranberries or something like that in a stew. That tends to be digested okay because it's in small amounts. And also there's this magic that happens when you cook foods together in a pot. So the idea of cooking a one-pot meal or integrating some food combinations that are otherwise difficult, if you cook them together in one pot, it's kind of like the foods get to know each other. They become friends with each other, so that once the food gets to your plate, everyone's happy, everyone's friendly, and there are no fights when the food gets into your digestion. So one pot cooking is kind of one of the hacks that I would say, a way to get around challenging food combinations. All right, let's go on to another example, melons. This is a big one. Melons have a mantra, at least a mantra for me. And the mantra is, eat them alone or leave them alone. because melons do not combine with anything, even melons of other types. So in a pinch, you can have a mixed melon salad, but if you can, try not to make it a habit. It's better to have each melon on its own. And the things that are particularly challenging with melons are what you see in pink: everything, especially dairy, eggs, fried food, grains, starches. Often we see melon, at least here in Europe, as an appetizer or a first course, like melon and ham, or melon with some porto. Actually, the porto would probably be good for digestion. And it's usually at the beginning of a meal. Ideally, that would be an hour or even a half an hour rather than the starter, and then you move right into the next course. Why? Because melons are primarily water and sugar, and they digest very easily, provided nothing else is already being digested or something doesn't follow too quickly afterwards. So best to keep your melons apart, eat them alone or leave them alone. And try to eat the different melons on their own. I remember growing up in the States, we'd often make like this boat out of a watermelon and then put all different kinds of balls of the other melons inside for a beautiful salad. Okay, from time to time, but when the time to time, or like the exceptions to the guidelines become a rule, become every day, that's when the challenges come up. Let me give you an antidote for melons in general, especially like cantaloupe, or like the melon you see on the screen. I can't remember what you call that. But a pinch of salt really helps with digesting melons, and also coriander, especially for cantaloupe, a good digestive helper. Lemons, we talked about that a little bit earlier. Lemons are sour and they require an acidic environment or acid enzymes to be digested. And when they get combined with grains, starchy food, it becomes very challenging to digest, as well as cucumbers, tomatoes, milk, and yogurt. So these are the tough ones. However, if you use just a little bit of lemon, like as a seasoning or a garnish or a flavoring, then it doesn't tend to be so problematic. But just know that anything that's sour in nature, whether it be lemon, lime, vinegar-based condiments, with any kind of starchy food, that's kind of in addition to what you're seeing on the screen. Let's say you're having like bread and a salad. That salad has a lemon or lime or vinegar-based dressing on it. That combination is going to be challenging. So for something that's less acidic, try lime instead, or maybe even use, well, I'm going to save that thought for later. So that's another challenging combination, lemons with other things. The next one is beans. We all know that beans can be a challenge to digest. Often it's not so much the bean itself, but it's what we combine our beans with. Beans go great with grains and vegetables, with other kind of beans, with nuts and seeds, basically with anything that's starchy in nature, because beans are primarily starches with a little bit of protein. And in terms of protein, in general, it's good to favor one protein per meal, which means that beans are going to be challenging at the same meal with cheese. Think about like an enchilada or a taco, like that has kidney beans and cheddar cheese, or chili con carne that has cheese on the top, or some other kind of bean and cheese, or eating, let's say, hummus, which is legume based, and an egg in the same meal. That's going to be another challenging combination, or beans and meat. Of course, we can get, we kind of detour this, this guideline if we cook everything in one pot. in France, one of the specialties, especially in the Southwest, is this dish called cassoulet. It's full of like duck and sausage and beans. And normally, well, it's kind of a heavy dish. It's really a dish that is eaten in the winter when we need that kind of nourishment. But it's actually a dish that's pretty digestible, and probably because it's cooked with a lot of fat, a lot of duck fat and other fats. And beans actually are better digested when there's a good source of fat. So when you're eating beans, make sure you have some good fat. Try not to combine them with fruit, with milk, with cheese, with yogurt, with eggs, meat, and fish. And if you need some digestive help in general for beans, there are all kinds of digestive spices that work that you can cook actually with your beans, like garlic, cloves, black pepper, hing, which is the Ayurvedic digestive, ultimate Ayurvedic digestive spice for digesting beans. There's fenugreek, turmeric, cumin, mustard seeds, bay leaf, and even the kind of herbs that we find here in Europe or around the world, thyme, rosemary, and again, good fat. So those are all good antidotes for digesting beans. And, funny, I hear often in my consultations, oh, I can't digest beans. And when I ask people what a typical menu looks like them on a daily basis, well, you see this nice, healthy meal of beans and a vegetable and a grain, and then chocolate mousse or a piece of chocolate for dessert. Now, no one blames the chocolate for being the problem of having gas and flatulence. They think it's the beans, right? Well, it's actually the chocolate that came at the end that totally messed up digestion. So that's another challenging combination. And in the bean category, we can also put soy. So soy and fruit is difficult, soy and cheese, soy and eggs. So another food that needs to be treated with attention. Okay, let's look at another one. Let's look at eggs. Eggs go good, eggs being a concentrated protein, go really good with grains and non-starchy vegetables. What are non-starchy vegetables? Anything that is green in nature. Think of everything in the brassica family, like cabbage and broccoli, kale, all of those vegetables, anything that's green and non-starchy, and go good with eggs as well as grains. Things that are challenging are milk. When you think of milk and eggs, think about like what you find often on the breakfast plate or at brunches, like omelets that have milk in them and eggs, or egg bakes, quiches, anything that has like casseroles. Often that's an American thing, casseroles, or there might be milk and eggs. So this is really challenging for digestion. So the good news is that there are alternatives to eggs. You can make flax eggs, or you can actually switch out the milk for something like a veggie milk, a milk that's made from a grain or another non-dairy, which would lessen and make more digestible the eggs. And also on the note of eggs, they're really a complete protein and something that should be eaten together. I know people who only eat the yellow or the yolk and only eat the white. But in fact, when we take the two apart, the egg actually becomes difficult to digest. So it's better to either leave eggs alone if you're going to do that, or just accept and eat the whole egg. Let's talk a little bit about milk. We talked about a little bit, but I just want to go back. So milk is one of those foods, concentrated protein as well, that's best enjoyed alone. However, some of the exceptions to that are rice. Think about like rice pudding, oatmeal, milk and dates. I talked about that ojas shake or that healthy smoothie. Milk and almonds are rejuvenative as well, and they go together. What's challenging is any other food with milk, especially bananas, cherries, melons, and everything you see in the red box. So it's better when you're having those other foods, what you see in the pink box, to use a plant-based milk, rather than dairy milk. Sometimes we see these funny combinations in smoothies, or often in the States, milk, especially for kids, accompanies a meal, and that's really challenging. Sorry for the Dairy Council, but milk doesn't really combine with other things. Another place that milk can come into a meal, and even if you don't drink milk, it can come in via desserts, like sweets, pastries, custards, things like that. So in terms of dessert, and my mentioning eat dessert first, well, that's one idea. But another idea is that if you're going to have a dessert that may not have the best combination of foods, or combined with either it itself or what you've eaten previously in the meal, have your dessert at lunch. And why? At noon, or when at the noontime, at lunchtime, this is when our digestive fire is naturally at its strongest. It's kind of like the outer sun. When the sun is at its zenith between 11 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon, or around about that, that's when our inner fire is at its zenith as well. And so that's when our metabolism works at its best. So if you're going to have a challenging food combination, or foods that are heavier to digest, or even just simply a dessert, do your best to have it at lunch rather than at night, when our digestive fire doesn't work so well, or it's not its strongest, let's say. And some of the things that help with digesting dairy milk are things like saffron, black pepper, ginger, cardamom, turmeric. The whole idea of chai, which has become popular in recent years, was actually a British invention. British occupation in India created this drink already in India, based much on Ayurveda. Indians make a nice herbal tea based on some of the spices I just mentioned, but also what we find in chai. And then when the British came along, they added the tea to it, and also the milk, to make what we know now as chai. But originally it was based on just spices as a digestive aid. Let's look at yogurt. Yogurt goes well with grains and vegetables. However, and also in this yogurt, you can think of kefir and also buttermilk. It's good with grains and vegetables. However, with fruit or beans or milk, cheese, eggs, meat, fish, nightshades, things like tomato, eggplant, even some, what else is, peppers, things like that, all are challenging with yogurt. And where might you find this? Well, yogurt could come in a sauce, or sometimes we find mango lassis or banana lassi, sometimes what you get at the end of a meal in an Indian restaurant. That's a really challenging combination. If you want to have a lassi, which is basically yogurt that's been diluted a little bit with water and some spices, that actually can be a digestive help, a way of better digesting a meal, provided the meal didn't have animal protein in it. So a lassi, yogurt that's been, let's say, like, here's the recipe, a fourth to a third of a yogurt with the rest of the quantity water. You whisk it up and add a pinch of cumin, a pinch of ginger, or a pinch or two of cardamom. Even cinnamon is excellent. And that whipped up or whisked up at the end of a meal can actually help with digestion. So here, the idea is to keep your fruit and your yogurt in different meals and separate. Even though it's sometimes challenging to find plain yogurt, where 80% of the yogurt we find in the supermarket has fruit in it. So better to get plain yogurt and add a little bit of honey or a little bit of maple syrup or some kind of sweetener, and make it into a digestive drink at the end of a meal. All right, let's talk a little bit about, this doesn't have meat on it. I'd like to talk about meat and fish. It's not on this list. So meat and fish are complex proteins, and these should always be eaten with leafy greens or non-starchy vegetables or ocean vegetables. Ocean vegetables are things like seaweed. Why? It's because meats and fish require a certain kind of digestive environment. And when they're eaten with starchy vegetables, which would be an improper or difficult, let's say difficult food combination, starchy vegetables like corn, squash, potatoes, think about a hamburger and fries, sweet potatoes, Jerusalem artichokes, a lot of the grains like rice, that starchy vegetable and meat or fish, that's a challenging combination according to Ayurveda. So it's better to eat your meat and your fish, replace the potatoes, replace the rice, try it with some leafy greens, broccoli, asparagus, all the things that we found in nature now. And in the summer, these are perfect ways to accompany meat and fish. Or cook your fish or your meat in a one-pot stew, like a ragu, or that's not the right word, that's the French word, but kind of, cooked together as a stew in one pot. And using some different spices like ginger and cardamom, sage or thyme or rosemary. Those are good spices that'll help digest meat and or fish. So the kind of the bottom line with concentrated proteins or true proteins is to keep your proteins simple. Choose one protein per meal. And that'll help with digestion in general, and then digestion of what you're of those meats or fish that you're eating. Another challenging this is our last nightshades. So nightshades, like I mentioned, are eggplant and peppers, tomatoes, with other vegetables, grains, beans, meat, fish, nuts, and seed. Easy to digest. When you start mixing those things with fruit, especially melons, cucumbers, milk, cheese, cheese and tomato, pizza, ooh, challenging combination. So this is something that can be enjoyed from time to time, but just know that, you probably know this from your own experience, that pizza can be something that can be challenging to digest. So antidotes, you can have a nice glass of wine, or you can have beer, because these fermented beverages actually help with digestion. Or have some broccoli with your pizza, or some spinach, or some asparagus, some kind of cooked leafy green as you eat your pizza to better digest it. So this is another category and one example of nightshades mixed with other things, especially dairy and cucumber and fruits. So you're probably saying, well, what about those cultures where these foods are eaten together, like in Italy? How do people from all this time, how do they digest their pizzas? Well, this is a topic or a concept. I'm going to go to that now. I'm going to skip over the rest. This is called the concept of habituation, what Ayurveda would call Oka Satmya. Oka Satmya. Oka Satmya actually means that we've become accustomed to a food. This is the law of habituation, which means that the combination works for an individual because they're used to it. I'll give you some examples. For example, this could be a food that was eaten often, like foods that we grow up eating, foods that come from our family, especially those foods that are made with love and infused with good things, good intentions, made by our mothers or our grandmothers or someone loving in the family. They could also be foods that come from a certain culture, and they allow us to become habituated to them. They could also think about this in a way that our bodies and our minds become habituated to them. So our bodies actually adapted to them. And this concept of oka satamya, or habituation. This goes beyond the food rules, or what Ayurveda would say impairs healthy digestion. Other things that come into play are like cultural influences, like what is inherent to a culture. Like in France or Switzerland, where a lot of cheese is eaten. People get used to eating cheese with bread or cheese with starches. That cheese eaten by a Japanese person, they would give them a stomach ache, or they would make them double over. Or even myself, as an example, when I came to France for the first time, I was 17 years old, and when I grew up, we ate cheese only on occasion. Well, yes, from time to time on pizza, but never in the quantity that is eaten on a daily basis in France. And when I was 17 and first in France and changed my diet, I had all of a sudden acne and skin problems. I gained weight. So I just realized at that point that it's something that my body wasn't used to. And so it was very challenging for me, whereas local people, they were able to eat it. Another example would be an Italian who's very used to eating wheat. Whereas in South America, let's say in Peru, they're very used to eating corn and potatoes. And maybe in Peru, someone having too much wheat, it's going to make them have digestive difficulties. So culture plays a role as well, because certain habits are really deep in our DNA. So when we look at food combining, we always need to keep our cultural or our culinary history in mind. So what we grew up on, or what we became used to, what our bodies are used to, keeping in mind that once what is digestible for one may not be digestible for another. I have that example on a daily basis. My partner is French, and he is kind of a Mediterranean guy, meaning that all the Mediterranean dishes he can digest with ease, but you give them to me, the girl from the Midwest, total problems digesting it. So we're all different. What asatmya is, donc the opposite of oka satmya. Asatmya means when we can no longer tolerate a food combination. So we become unhabituated. And this can happen with eating a wrong combination, I shouldn't say wrong, a difficult combination over time. So we may have the digestive strength to digest something day in, day out for the most of our life. But one day, with an abuse or an overuse of that food combination, something can change. We can become unhabituated. So what worked in the past may no longer work now. And this is the concept then of asatmya. So there's okasatmya, the accustomation to a food, the law of habituation, and asatmya, when things no longer work. So what was once tolerated is no longer tolerated. And sometimes that lack of toleration can come from overeating a certain food, or having too much of it over time. Let me go back to this chart, and then I'm going to wrap this up because I see that I've already gone over time. If you need to leave, please feel free to do so. There'll be a replay, I think, Jiamyang, and then you can catch what you missed. So one thing that's challenging is leftovers. Ideally, leftovers should be, if you're eating leftovers, you only eat leftovers, according to Ayurveda. When you have leftovers and freshly cooked food in the same meal, they become difficult to digest. Why? It's really a question of prana meaning vitality. Leftovers are weaker in vitality than something that's cooked the day of. So ideally have just a food of leftovers, or just a meal of freshly cooked food. And if you have to combine the two, amp up the spices in your leftovers so that you increase the vitality, increase the digestibility of the food. Another challenging combination can be raw foods with cooked foods. So ideally, cooked foods, according to Ayurveda, cooked foods are always going to be easier to digest than raw foods. And this is just in general, because raw foods are always going to ask for more digestive strength than foods that are cooked. That's another topic, but just in passing, I wanted to mention that. So when you're having cooked food and raw food together, make cooked food the large quantity and just a small quantity of raw foods. Where it becomes challenging is when there's large quantities of raw food with cooked foods. So minimize the raw and amp up the cooked, or make an entire meal of just raw foods. That's one way of getting around it. And there's one more kind of, maybe you might think it's strange combination, and that's honey. Honey and ghee. Ghee is clarified butter, which is used in Ayurveda as being kind of the, I should say, the quintessential cooking oil or cooking fat. Ayurveda thinks that when you eat ghee and honey in equal weights, meaning weight, that it's challenging to digest. So it's better to have more ghee or more honey or more honey or more ghee, and kind of the equivalent would be more of one than the other. Like what is challenging would be, let's say, a teaspoon of honey for three teaspoons of ghee. 1 teaspoon of honey for 3 teaspoons of ghee would weigh the same weight. So that would be a challenging combination. For those of you who are new to Ayurveda, who don't know or don't use ghee, you don't really have to worry about this, but this is more for the kind of the seasoned people who are joining tonight, if, to know that honey can be challenging with ghee. And just in passing, one thing that's difficult with honey is when it's cooked. Ayurveda suggests never cooking or boiling honey, because it changes its nature. It turns it into actually ama in our system, this sticky, toxic substance. So honey should always be used in something that is not too hot. You can always test if your tea is too hot to put honey in. Just dip your little finger in your cup. And if you burn your finger, sorry, it's too hot to put honey in. Wait till it cools a little bit, and then you can put your honey in. One last combination that I want to share is coffee and milk. Coffee and milk in Ayurveda is considered to be a balm for digestion. And why? Because the two proteins require different digestive environments, and the two create digestive wars, as I mentioned earlier. So if you're going to have milk in your coffee, like a cappuccino or something like that, save it for your next trip to Italy, and bring some cardamom along with you. Cardamom is an antidote for the ill effects of coffee on our adrenals and our kidneys, but also helps with the effects of caffeine and mixed with milk, or coffee with milk. So you can also make your cappuccino or have your daily coffee with a nut, a seed, or a grain milk, which will be much more digestible. I wanted to show you, and I'll have this as part of the documents that I send you. One last share. This is another chart that comes from a website called Saraswati Ayurveda. And this is kind of the Banyan chart condensed, and kind of gives you guidelines for what can go together and what not. And I'll let you look at this on your own. But when you see starch on the chart, starches are grains, starchy vegetables, and beans. And they go well with non-starchy vegetables and also other starches, but difficult with protein or difficult with fruit. And I'll let you kind of explore that on your own, but it just basically recapitulates the major points that I shared with you tonight. How can we better our digestion? One thing we can do is, as I mentioned earlier, is have one-pot meals. The magic of cooking foods together so that they get to know each other and become friends in the pot. will help to increase good compatibility. But the one thing on that note is don't make a big pot of food and then eat it all week long. That would be challenging for digestion. So intelligent food combining is good, but also eating food with that's rich in vitality is good. And food that's been sitting in a refrigerator all week and reheated over time many times, it is very weak in vitality. So not so good for our digestive fire. Again, eat challenging foods at lunch when your digestive strength is the best. Have dessert at lunch rather than at night. And one thing I didn't mention, often quantity and quality are important. So some food combinations aren't so challenging, others are. In small amounts, certain challenging combinations may not be such a challenge, but in large amounts, yes. So that's something that you can play with as well. And then some of the digestive aids I wanted to share with you. One thing you can do before a meal is make a ginger boost. That's taking fresh ginger root, either grating it or cutting a slice of it. You add a little bit of lemon or lime juice, just a little squeeze, an optional pinch of salt. Those three things, something that's pungent, that's sour, and that's salty, are all tastes that are going to rev up the digestive fire, create enzymes, and give an invitation to challenging food combinations, but then just food in general. And you can also add a little honey if you like honey, and if it's something that you enjoy. So a little bit of honey can also go into that that ginger boost that you could have at the beginning of a meal. Other things are including carminative spices and herbs in your cooking in general, either right into a dish on the table as a condiment or in a digestive drink. Think about ginger, fennel, cardamom, cumin, and some of these can even be eaten just like that, like chewing on cumin seeds or chewing on fennel seeds before a meal, or even after a meal if your digestion's heavy or if you had some kind of combinations that aren't the best. You can also, in between a meal, if you have gas or bloating, chewing on fennel or cumin seeds is a nice antidote. Also starting your meal with a cocktail, like a bitter cocktail. I think of some of the Italian bitter drinks like Fernet Branca, Cynar. There's also others in plenty of other cultures like Gentian. All these are bitter drinks or drinks that are based on bitters that help stimulate digestion. Another way to enhance digestion or rev up hydrochloric acid or digestive enzymes is take a tablespoon, let's say 2 to 3 teaspoons of apple cider vinegar in a cup of water, half an hour before a meal, is a way of increasing digestive strength, stimulating Agni, as well as just drinking a glass of water, like an hour to a half an hour before a meal, gives a signal to your body that something's coming and helps to stimulate digestive enzyme. Also, sipping warm water during a meal is a great way to enhance digestion, or even hot water in the colder times of the year. Something that's to be avoided is cold drinks, fruit drinks, and especially milk. Having a pinch of salt at the end of the meal is actually a digestive aid. Chewing during a meal, 50% of your digestion begins in the mouth, especially with anything that's starchy based. Foods that are rich in starches, because the digestive enzyme needed to digest those foods, amylase, it's really only produced in the mouth. So if you chew well, you'll help digest those different foods. I think that's it. And ginger is really like the big aid in digestive friend, let's say. So those are just a few of the suggestions that I wanted to share with you. There are many others. Ayurveda is a very rich science, but I think that that's kind of the essential of Ayurvedic food combining. And I'm happy now to answer your questions, and I apologize for having gone over. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Michele. I saw there are quite a few questions in the chat as you were talking,
Okay.
as you went along. So
I'll open up the chat and then I'll say I'll reply. If some of the questions are really personal in nature, I prefer that you write to me because they may not be of concern for everybody. So let's see. What about people with blood sugar issues? Is eating like that going to cause problems? So eating like that is putting sweetener in tea, and this person has saying, because I don't really understand. Okay. People with blood sugar issues, blood sugar can be helped with having adequate proteins at each meal. Making sure that there's a true source of protein for breakfast, for lunch, and for dinner. When we have adequate protein, it really helps with blood sugar, and it helps a lot with food cravings and also with the desire to eat sweets. 90% of sweet desire to eat sweet, either at a dessert or in between meals, can be remedied with having the right kind of protein for the body. And that might be animal protein for certain people. There are people who aren't intended to be vegetarians. And often there are vegetarians or vegans who need to eat meat, and they don't honor that. I'm not saying that everybody needs to eat meat, but what I'm saying is that often when there are imbalances with vegans and vegetarians that don't get the right kind of protein for the body, there's often imbalances that come from wanting and craving and eating too much sugar or sugary things or sweets. Another question, I hope that was the answer to your question, Lee. What about plant-based yogurts like coconut or almond yogurt? These could be potential alternatives for people who don't have dairy. However, you need to know that these plant-based yogurts are very damp and very cold. And when we eat these cold, natured foods, and that tends to diminish our digestive fire. It weakens our Agni. And when Agni gets weakened in the stomach, but also the spleen, these kind of cold natured yogurts also weaken the spleen. We can think about the spleen, which is over here on the left side of the body, as helping the stomach in its digestive warmth. Eating foods that are too cold in nature require a lot of strength, not only from the stomach, but also from the spleen. And when the spleen gets weakened, then the digestive fire gets weakened. And when we have weakened digestive fire, it can create damp conditions in the body. And having a damp body is kind of a breeding ground for all different kinds of things, whether it be candida, joint problems, skin problems, problems with the thyroid, the list goes on and on. So I don't know, I'm kind of on the fence with the plant-based yogurts. Maybe just keep them for the warmer months of the year, warm them up by taking them out of the refrigerator enough in advance so that you don't eat them cold from the fridge, that they're the more room temperature, and add some cinnamon, cardamom, some warming spices. Cinnamon's great for working with blood sugar. Having cinnamon tea or mixing cinnamon into a plant-based or a dairy yogurt can be a way also working with blood sugar issues. But those plant-based yogurts really need to be warmed up in some kind of way, either temperature-wise, but also by using spices. And preferably not in the colder months of the year, nor straight away in the morning. Okay. Can I get the slides, please? Yes, we will send out the slides to everybody. Someone's saying, talking about sauerkraut or fermented vegetables. That's something I didn't have the chance to mention, but those are also, I would call them digestive aids. Fermented food, if your body can digest them, can be really helpful for producing digestive enzymes and also for digesting challenging foods. Just so even having just a little bit of sauerkraut or another kind of fermented vegetable, or having a little glass of kombucha. Yogurt comes in there as well. But just know that all fermented foods are also heating foods. So you want to kind of tailor those down, or eat fewer of them in the summer when it's hot out, when our body's hot already. So keep that in mind. What about milk and broken wheat, or milk and ginger? Ginger and milk, they go good together. However, when milk gets a little older, and I've noticed this, like when I make chai for my partner in the morning, using black tea and freshly grated ginger, when I put some milk in it at the end, if the milk isn't like it's on its last days of being fresh, the milk can curdle. So milk needs to be fresh when you want to add fresh ginger to it. Milk and broken wheat. Broken wheat, are you talking about maybe about like bulgur wheat, something like that? That's an okay, that's an acceptable combination. In general, milk and grains, at least for me, and I have maybe my exceptions to the rule, that things that work for me, but milk and grains, when cooked with spices, but not mixed with other foods, can be a good combination, and can be also really a good healing food. Someone's asking about taking vitamins. That's personally, I try to get my vitamins out of the food that I eat. Some people need to supplement, because it's true that our food isn't what it was maybe 50 years ago, 100 years ago. Our soil has changed. So some people need to supplement, but again, that's something individual. But ideally, we would get our vitamins directly from foods. Let's see, talking about cooking beans, that in the UK, cooks don't cook beans that long, and this causes digestion compared to in Mexico, where beans are cooked to be soft. It's true that beans are best digested when they don't look like beans, when you've cooked them so much that they kind of turn to mush, like a good dal, which is the word for legumes and beans, but also for a dish that's cooked in India, or hummus, which is mixed with chickpeas, mixed with tahini, which is oily, and olive oil. That oil in the tahini, which is the sesame paste, or the olive oil, is going to actually help with the astringency, the drying nature of beans. So in Mexico, they use lard a lot, and maybe that's why the beans are digested, because there's a lot of fat that's cooked with them. So that's helpful. And then also using digestive spices. I know they use epazote, which is a spice similar to maybe what we'd find here, like bay leaf or rosemary or thyme, to help with bean digestibility. Okay, someone is asking about Banyan. Banyan Botanicals is the name of the herb and food company, and based in Ashland, Oregon, from where I got one of the charts that I showed in the slideshow, Banyan Botanicals, and I'll write it in the chat so that everybody has it right away. Banyan Botanicals. The company was founded by two former students of Dr. Vasant Lad from the Ayurvedic Institute. Let's see. Okay, which is the spice that helps digest beans? The one Ayurvedic spice I mentioned is hing, H-I-N-G, also known as asafoetida. It's actually a resin. It's hard. You can either, most of the times you find it in a powdered form, and it's mixed with turmeric and mixed with a little fenugreek. But that you can find online. And if you have an Indian grocer in the store where you live or nearby, you can usually find it there as well. Let's see. Someone was asking about eating fruit an hour ahead of the meal. Ideal. Let's see what else. You will get a copy of the foods, the food chart. Some yogurts say they are live and some they just contain milk. What are the benefits difference? Some yogurts say they are live and some say they just contain milk. Well, the live can be referring to live cultures. So some kind of probiotic was used in making those yogurts, like lactobacillus or kezai, those kind of different things. Actually, the best way to get probiotics rather than taking a supplement is to get them through fermented foods, yogurt, sauerkraut, things like that, and even more so when you make them your own. Most of the time, the store-bought yogurts aren't fermented in a traditional way, and so there aren't true probiotics that our bodies can benefit, and there are some exceptions to that. But when you make yogurt at home, you can ferment it for at least 24 hours, and then you have true probiotics that are really beneficial for the system. Someone's asking, is there any difference between ghee and butter? Yes, you can think of ghee, clarified, actually clarified butter isn't, it's Ayurvedic clarified butter because there's a whole process to making it. It's butter that's been cooked at least a half an hour, 45 minutes, depending on the quantity and the quality of your butter. But the idea is we're extracting out of the butter what makes butter when it's cooked. I'm not talking about butter when it's raw, because raw butter can be very digestible, and Ayurveda is not against using butter. Ayurveda is not so much keen on using butter in cooking because it's challenging to digest. But the process of making ghee takes out the lactose and it takes out the casein, which are two milk proteins that make butter difficult to digest. And once you've done this process of transformation, then you're basically left with pure oil. It's the essence of milk or essence of the cow, essence of grass. And with this pure fat that has no, if it's made in the proper way, it'll have no more milk product in it. You basically made it a vegan product. It still comes from a cow, but it's you can call it vegan. You can conserve it or keep it for a long time, something you can't do with butter. It can be stored outside of the fridge, and it is one of the best cooking oils because it can be cooked at high temperatures up to 450 degrees Fahrenheit, 250 degrees Celsius, and without changing its nature. Most oils, when they're cooked, they change their quality. A lot of oils become trans fats through the process of cooking. Certain oils should rarely be cooked with, like even olive oil. A lot of people cook with olive oil. Very challenging, especially if you have a sluggish or lazy liver and gallbladder. Olive oil shouldn't be cooked beyond medium heat, and ideally we should just keep olive oil for a condiment on the table directly on what we're eating if we really want to get the good qualities of olive oil, such as the polyphenols, which go away in the cooking process. Okay, so those are the main differences between ghee and butter. Butter has a ton of vitamin A, also vitamin D. Some of that goes away in the cooking process of making ghee. However, one thing that's really interesting with ghee, not only its cooking temperatures, but also it's considered to be a vehicle. So anything that you cook with ghee, whether it be a spice or a certain food, it gets increased, or its potency or its vitality gets increased, because ghee is considered to be an adjuvant. It's a vehicle for taking the things that it's cooked with where they need to go in the body with greater ease. So if you're taking an herb with ghee, that herb is going to get to where it needs to go much easier than if it were just taken with, say, hot water. Spices, they get activated in ghee and get better absorbed in the body. And ghee contains something called butyric acid. And this is the #1 food that your intestinal bacteria are looking for. They love butyric acid. They feed on butyric acid. So that's another motivation for either buying ghee or making it yourself. And I highly recommend making ghee at home because it's very satisfying. And once you start using it, it'll be difficult to no longer use it. And someone asking about sunflower oil. What about sunflower oil? Sunflower oil is another one of those oils that shouldn't be cooked past medium heat, and also ideal for the summer. It's a cooling oil. Not all oils are cooling, but sunflower oil is, coconut oil is. Many people use coconut oil all year round. However, it should be kind of reserved for the hotter months of the year, unless you're a person who is hot by nature. You can use it kind of all the time. Did I answer all of the questions? I think so. In any case, you'll have my email at the end of the slideshow that will be sent out in form of PDF, and you can contact me. I did give last year, as Jem Young mentioned at the beginning of the talk, I did 2 workshops that lasted 4 hours. One was cooking for spring, about how to reset your digestive fire, how to reset Agni. And I did one in the summer as well on summer cooking. And if I'm not mistaken, those are available on YouTube on the Shangshung Institute UK site. So feel free to have a look at those. It's 4 hours of instruction, so you can continue your education. And those like this were on donation events. So if you're motivated to do so, you can give a donation if you've watched that and benefited from it. That'll help Shangshung Institute to continue to thrive and offer these great programs. Anything else? Any final ideas, questions?
I have a question. I looked online while you were speaking for this Sarasvati website where you said there's the good food chart, but I couldn't find it. So I'm just wondering if perhaps you could share it maybe later when we send everybody the.
Yeah, it's on the chart. So it's www. It's kind of hard to find on the site. Saraswati Ayurveda. Saraswati Ayurveda. .com. saraswatiayurveda.com, and it's an article that this Rachel wrote. And then there's also the Ayurvedic Institute, Dr. Vasant Lad's Institute, that was based in Albuquerque, New Mexico for many years, and now they're moving to North Carolina, and they're great resources. Dr. Lad has a wonderful article on food combining. So basically what I've shared with you, but goes into more details, and there's a chart as well. Banyan Botanicals has a great resource as well, and not only with food combining, but lots of different articles. So there are plenty of online resources for furthering education or having questions answered, and going deeper, because this is just kind of the surface of just one piece of Ayurvedic wisdom that can help with digestion. It's not the whole picture, but it's part of it. And it's one place that one way to explore if you're looking to improve your digestion, especially long-term.